Okay, so you want to own a fish farm. Dig some ponds, buy some fingerlings, throw feed twice a day, and wait for the fish to grow. Sounds simple, but here's the strange part. More than half of all the seafood eaten on Earth today doesn't come from the ocean anymore, it comes from farms. Aquaculture quietly overtook wild-caught fishing as the world's primary source of seafood. This is a genuinely massive global business. And yet in Mississippi, the largest catfish farming region in America, the math is often brutal. The actual cost to produce a pound of catfish frequently runs higher than the price farmers get paid for it. Some of the most experienced fish farmers in the country are, in certain years, losing money on every pound they grow. By the end of this video, you'll know why feed costs make or break this industry, why a single disease outbreak can wipe out half a country's production, why the biggest players on Earth pay staggering sums just for the legal right to grow fish in the ocean, and what it actually takes to make real money doing this. This is also a genuinely different kind of business than most others on this channel. A coffee shop sets its own prices. A casino has a mathematical edge on every bet. A fish farm has neither advantage. It's an agricultural commodity business dressed up as modern food tech. And that distinction changes everything about how this industry actually works. 3 sizes of this business. The smallest entry point is a small pond operation, tilapia or catfish, a few 1-acre ponds. Pond excavation and lining runs $15,000 to $40,000, plus land at $3,000 to $12,000 an acre. All in, around $50,000 to get started. The middle tier is a real commercial catfish farm, 20 to 40 acres, proper aeration and feeding infrastructure. Total investment, $150,000 to $300,000, not including land. Add processing equipment, and a large operation can exceed $500,000. The top tier is industrial marine aquaculture, open ocean salmon farming at the scale practiced in Norway and Chile. This isn't built with a backhoe. It's built with hundreds of millions of dollars and, critically, a government license just to legally put fish in the water. In Norway, new salmon farming capacity is sold at public auction. One 2020 auction alone raised roughly $670 million, with buyers paying an average of $25,000 per metric ton of capacity. Individual licenses have sold for over $1 million each. That's why a handful of companies like Mowi and Salmar dominate the entire industry. They've spent hundreds of millions just buying the legal right to grow more fish than anyone else. Species choice matters as much as scale. Catfish and tilapia are the entry points most American farmers actually use, since both tolerate pond conditions well and have established domestic fingerling supply chains, typically priced 15 to 50 cents each. Species that need open ocean net pens and precise cold water conditions, salmon being the obvious one, simply aren't available to a small inland farmer at any budget. That's why the industry splits cleanly into small independent pond operators on one side and a handful of licensed industrial players on the other, with almost nothing in between. Where the money actually goes. Here's the trick with this business. In most industries on this channel, the biggest cost is rent or labor. In fish farming, it's feed 50 to 60% of all variable costs for a typical catfish operation. You're running a business whose input is a commodity you don't control the price of. Convert it into a different commodity you also don't control the price of. Mississippi State's own aquaculture economists reported that catfish production recently cost between $1.12 and $1.30 per pound, while farmers were only paid between $1.10 and $1.15 per pound. A huge share of catfish farmers were operating at or below break-even. Only the largest operations, running 700 to 2,000 water acres, had enough scale to stay reliably profitable. Unlike a coffee shop that can raise prices when milk gets expensive, a catfish farmer has no such lever. Price is set nationally by total supply and demand, locked in months after the feed cost was already locked in. Every farmer is a price taker, never a price setter. You're effectively locking in your biggest cost and your eventual selling price at 2 completely different points in time, months apart, with no ability to adjust either one once the fish are already growing. The only real lever left is productivity. Mississippi farms pushed average yield from about 4,000 pounds per acre in 2010 to over 5,700 pounds per acre in 2021 through better pond management alone. why even the biggest players aren't immune. In 2007, Chile, then the world's second-largest salmon farming country, got hit by infectious salmon anemia. Production halved over 3 years. Estimated losses, around $600 million. Thousands of jobs vanished, and the entire country had to rebuild its regulatory system from scratch. Norway, the most experienced salmon farming nation on Earth, isn't immune either. Despite 50 years of experience and strict biosecurity rules, disease-related losses have held steady at 10 to 16% of total output for 2 decades. In 2025 alone, Norway confirmed 14 outbreaks of the same disease that crushed Chile, on pace with one of the worst years on record despite vaccinating nearly 200 million salmon the year before. On top of that, Norway's government proposed a 40% tax on salmon farming profits, later reduced to 25% after industry pushed back a policy swing large enough to crash share prices and freeze investment across the sector. Even the most dominant, best-capitalized companies on the planet can't fully insulate themselves from disease and government decisions entirely outside their control. Other countries treat this risk very differently. One industry estimate suggested that reproducing Norway's strict licensing and environmental standards for a large offshore salmon project in the U.S. could cost close to $1 billion in permitting alone, compared to a coastal lease in a state like Maine running as little as $100 per acre per year. That gap is exactly why premium salmon farming capacity stays concentrated in a handful of countries that built expensive, strict regulatory systems decades ago. How individual farmers actually lose money. 3 patterns repeat constantly. 1. Borrowing heavily to stock a pond, then getting caught when feed costs rise and fish prices fall before harvest, sometimes 18 months later, with loan payments due regardless. 2. Underestimating biosecurity. Disease in an enclosed pond spreads all at once, not gradually. One bad batch of fingerlings or one cage breach can wipe out an entire crop. 3. Underestimating regulatory exposure. Fish farming touches shared waterways in a way that draws far more scrutiny than typical row crop farming. None of these are about picking the wrong species. All 3 are about a business where your biggest cost, your selling price, and your biggest catastrophic risk are all set by forces outside the farm's fence line. A risk profile most farmers inherit the moment they stock their first pond, regardless of how carefully they're run. What you actually walk away with. Scenario 1. A mid-sized catfish farm, 25 water acres, roughly $200,000 invested. At around $7,100 per water acre in farm gate sales, that's about $177,000 in annual revenue. After feed and everything else, a good year nets $15,000 to $25,000 in real profit. A bad feed cost year can land at break-even. Scenario 2. Scale into the large tier bracket, 700-plus water acres, the size class that reaches consistent profitability. An 800-acre farm generating around $5,600,000 a year can net a profit margin in the mid-teens to 20%, putting real profit around $800,000 to over $1 million a year. Only about a third of Mississippi catfish farms ever reach this size. Beyond that is industrial marine aquaculture, not really a farm anymore, but a licensed, capital-intensive export business. Almost nobody starting from zero gets there. Most companies built their position over decades. There's a third path many real farmers choose: diversification rather than pure scale. Some mid-size operators add a fingerling hatchery, selling juvenile fish to other farmers, or sell directly to local restaurants and farmers markets at premium prices. Both strategies help reduce dependence on wholesale markets, though they don't eliminate feed cost and market price risks. So if you get into fish farming, remember the rule: you don't set your own prices, and you don't control your biggest cost. Survive feed price swings, manage disease risk, and grow large enough for scale to work in your favor. That's the entire game.